Welcome to SQL Handbook. My name is Shashain, and in this video we're going to talk about how nulls behave in the where clause. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because nulls, as I've written over here, can cause problems in your queries if not understood properly. A lot of times people will run into queries that are fired and they get results back that they don't quite expect, and they get confused why it turns like this. And sometimes it has to do with a null value being in your data. Okay, so something I want to talk about before we get into the examples I have here is something called three-valued logic. Okay, this is actually how a where clause is evaluated. It uses something called three-valued logic. And not just the where clause, but also having clause does this too. So what is the three-valued logic? So basically, three-valued logic is saying that the where clause, the condition in the where clause can give us one of three different outcomes. Okay, so what do I mean? For example, we have a query over here that says select star from products where stock is greater than 90. Okay, so that's our condition in the where clause. Now this condition has three possible outcomes that can be evaluated for. It can be true, it can be false, and it also can be unknown. Now generally speaking, most people only think of true and false. They're not aware that there's also a third option called unknown right over here, right? Now, I'll get into why this is important in a bit, but just know that there's three outcomes possible when you fire a condition in a where clause or having clause. Okay, in this examples, we're going to go through only where clause, but the same logic applies to having clause as well. Okay, so this is the first thing to understand. There's three outcomes. Now, what do those outcomes mean, and why does that have anything to do with the null with null values? Okay, so let me talk to you about what's in this table first. Now I have a table over here in my environment, my local environment. It's called a products table. It's got 4 columns: product ID, product name, price, and stock. Okay, very simple table. It's got 6 rows. Basically, this table holds product information for this business. Okay. And what it says is that these products here, we sell them at this price per product, and we hold this much in the warehouse for the stock. Okay, so we have 80 keyboards, we have 150 cables in the warehouse, right? So that's what's going on here. And now you will realize we have a null value in our stock column for laptop charger, which means that we don't actually have a stock count for how many laptop chargers we have in our warehouse. Okay, so we got to figure that out, but we currently don't have in our database. Okay, so now if I were to run this query, select star from products where stock is greater than 90. Okay, what does that mean? Basically, where stock value is greater than 90, we want those rows returned to us. Okay, and now looking at this table, it's pretty easy for us to understand that it's going to be the first row for wireless mouse and the third row for USB-C cables, right? So if I run this query, I get those two back. Now, that might seem very straightforward and very simple, and it is. But something I want us to understand is how those two rows were picked. I know it's simply easy to just look at this and say, this is over a 90 and this is over 90 as well, so those two rows should come back. But there's a bit more detail that I want us to follow. And this might seem like, you already know this, but there's a reason why I'm explaining this, and you'll see later on. So how does this query get fired? Select star from products where stock is greater than 90. So basically what happens here is this condition over here in the where clause is evaluated for every row. Okay, so stock value, the stock column over here, we start with the first one, it's 100. So we put 100 over there. Okay, and then what happens is that we evaluate this condition here, and if it returns true, then that row is returned to us, right? So obviously 100 is greater than 90, which is true. So then that row is returned to us. 80 is less than 90, so this statement here, this condition, is false. So we get a false for that one. So that is not returned to us, okay? The where clause only returns what is true to the front end, to what we see in the screen, okay? So only rows here that are returned true come to the front end. That's why you get the row 1 and row 3, which is cable and mouse. Those two get returned to us when we run the query, because those two are the only rows that evaluate to true between those two queries, between all those rows. So far we have put 100, right? We put 80, we put 150, and for each row, right? Now we get to a null, and we put null there. What happens here? Does this say false, true, or unknown? Well, it's going to be unknown for this case, right? Because a null value, right? A null value is a unknown value in the database. The database engine does not know what null is meant to be. It's not certain, right? It's not certain to understand what null can be. Null is this unknown value in SQL. And so being unknown, the database engine can't say whether this condition over here evaluates to true or false. It can't say that for certain, right? It's not 100% sure which one it's going to be. So that's why we have a third option called unknown. So this condition over here evaluates to unknown, right? That's why we say this is three-valued logic. Unknown is another possibility other than true and false. So in this case, we get unknown returned to us for the null, for the sixth row. Okay? But we know that the where clause only returns what is true to us. So it doesn't matter, it's not going to return to us regardless. So what is true in this case is rows 1 and 3, which is wireless mouse and USB-C cable. Okay? Now what would happen in this query? Select star from products where stock equals null. Okay. So again, we'll look at the table, products, and we'll go through this again just like earlier. So we're looking at a new condition. It's where stock equals null. So what would we expect to be returned to us in this table? Well, looking at this, just like visually, I guess most people would say that we would expect the sixth row over here, laptop charger, to be returned to us. So let's run this query and see what happens. Nothing comes to us, right? Nothing is returned to us. Why is that? So let's again look at the table. So we know this query is going to give us no values back. But why is that? Well, let's do the same thing that we did again. 100 over here. What is this equal to? What is 100 equal to null? It's unknown, right? And we know that the where clause only returns what is true. So if this is unknown, this row is not going to be returned to us. The next row then, 80. Will 80 be returned to us? No, that's also unknown. It's unknown because the null value here is, it can be anything. The database engine can see this as any value. So it's not false, it's unknown. Okay? Because null can be 80. Because null is an unknown value, so as we don't know what it is, it can be 80 in this way of thinking, this three-value logic way of thinking, right? I know that might seem a bit strange, but that's how it's viewed as. So this is not false, it's unknown. And we know that the where clause only returns what is true, right? So we don't know what null can be, we don't know what null is, it's unknown to us, so we can't say 80 equals null. So it's unknown. Then same for 150, right? Same for 50, same for 60, and then we get to null. Now looking at this, we think to ourselves, null equals null. Yeah, that's true. But that's actually not the case. So in this case, what we're asking is, does this unknown value equal this unknown value? And again, we don't know that. We are not certain what either value equals to, which means that this condition also evaluates to unknown. And since this condition evaluates to unknown, it's not going to be shown to the front end, to us on the screen. That's why when we run this query, when this is stock equals null, we get nothing returned to us. Because null, and when you do a comparison between null and null, you get unknown. You don't get true and you don't get false, you get unknown, which again is not presented to the front end, because the where clause will only present to us what is true. Where clause only returns what is true. That's very important to understand. This is why I wanted to go into the finer details here, because it helps us understand why a query like this will return no values And even though we can see there's a null value in the stock column. So I hope that makes sense. But now you might be thinking, right, how do I then signal out and get this row? Let's say you wanted, for whatever reason, to write a query that gets you the null values, right? Now you know this is not going to work when you say stock equals null. So what can you do? So the workaround is that instead of saying stock equals null, what we can do is, I'll just copy this query. What we can do instead is, we can write stock is null. So there's a keyword in SQL called is, and is made for this specific purpose, right? To find out which values in this column are unknown, right? So it's not doing a comparison like what is happening over here with comparison between this value and this value. It's more saying, let's find the unknown values. So when you write like this, and when I run this query, here we go. We got a laptop charge returned to us, even though it's a null value, because we're just saying here where stock is unknown. And that's this, and that equals to true over here for this row, right? So I hope that makes sense. I know it can be a little confusing, but this 3-value logic system or concept is very important to understand. So basically we're just saying 3-value logic is that we're saying that there's 3 values that are be able to return from a where and having clause. And those 3 values are true, false, and unknown. And the where clause or having clause will always return what is true. It won't return anything that is false or unknown. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, please leave a comment and I'll try to clarify things. Follow if you guys want more SQL, and I'll see you guys in the next video.